Hello, and I hope this message finds you well. I wanted to talk today about a definition of commitment offered by my friend Kyle Hilding. And perhaps I'm inspired to do this because I just saw Kyle. He came and visited me, and we spent several days together. So I'm revisiting in my mind how profound and how useful and how spontaneous this definition was. Kyle and I were speaking once, and I asked him, "What does commitment mean to you?" And he said, "Commitment is using a combination of your values, intuitions, and relationships to navigate shifting circumstances." I might be slightly paraphrasing, but this was the essence. And I want to pause to just note a couple reasons why this definition is so profound and so unusual. The first reason is that this definition is individualistic. Typically, we think of commitment as having to do with relationship, having to do with union, or it could have to do with, an organization or a purpose. But in general, it promotes a notion of we say we're going to do something, and then do we follow through on it? Do we do it? In the eyes of the other party. They sort of reflect back to us the accuracy, the trustworthiness of our commitment. So it's this dualistic or social thing. And Kyle's notion allows for a commitment of the soul. What is true for me over time? And I would opine that even in relationship, even through our orientation to various communities or organizations, we remained individuals and we have a soul's journey, a soul's purpose. And so a definition of commitment that provides space for that is immediately useful. The second thing about Kyle's definition is that it holds forth these three factors we can sort of prioritize interchangeably, or that we can arrange in different hierarchies. So we have not only values, but also intuitions and relationships. And at some times in our lives, values might take precedence, and at other times, relationship might take precedence, for example. And I'll give specific examples on, how each of those combinations might play out. But this provides us some wiggle room as we shift through life. And I would say, I'll expand on this a little bit at the end of this commentary. This definition really speaks to those times in life where doubt and ambiguity arise, not where we are immediately certain of a decision and can sort of proceed instinctually, but when we are stuck in a morass and there's sort of a churning process to get through. I think this definition can yield a lot of riches in those moments. So it's more versatile, more adaptable, and again, as I said earlier, more individualistic than our typical definitions. So here I want to break down piece by piece each attribute of this definition and discuss how following that attribute might look in practice. So again, Kyle said something to the effect of, commitment is using a combination of our values, intuitions, and relationships to navigate shifting circumstances. Let's talk about the first piece, values. So what are values? There's a very widespread error in Western thinking that positions are arrived at logically and intentionally and therefore become unassailable. So you hear this, often in the adage, facts not feelings, or facts over feelings. It's like, what I believe because, I've looked at the evidence and I've used my reason and there's no emotion in my conclusion. And, we could get into gender dynamics. Historically speaking, emotion has been associated with femininity, logic with masculinity. And so there's this, implicit judgment that emotion is somehow womanly or feminine and that's bad, right? That's where this line of thinking is really stemming from. But even beyond that, the reason I say this is an error that's widespread in Western philosophy is that we know, and today neuroscience continues to prove this, that emotion actually precedes logic. So when we set about on a course of logic trying to prove something, it's because there's an emotional impulse innately, and that is in fact what's driving us. It's even been shown that your brain is initiating a response even before you were conscious of that response, which also throws into question the entire positing of free will, but that's another story. So emotion precedes logic, precedes reason, and drives it. And I would argue value precedes emotion. Value is what constructs emotion. So values are these sort of base principles we have, and I would say many of them are inborn. They're not something we arrive at in life through experience, through reflection, but for some reason they speak to our soul on a very fundamental level. There are certain images, certain tastes we come into life with, and we seek to enact those on the world stage. We seek to make the world more greatly conform to them. Some examples of these might be things like justice, peace, love, intimacy, vulnerability. These are things we can't go deeper than. We can't define them except through examples because they are abstractions. They are what Plato called the realm of forms, the Platonic ideals. And if you'd like a pretty rigorous list of them, a place I might look is, I think it's called The Farther Reaches of Human Experience by Maslow, Abraham Maslow, in which he was exploring, these base values that people in higher states of consciousness or development more thoroughly, more surely pursue. We're trying to bring these things into the world independent of any greater reason. We're doing them out of some divine inspiration. So how can we use these values to, as my friend Kyle said, navigate moments of or shifting circumstances? Well, one thing I would say is that what we think of as goals actually derive from values. So you may have a goal to become a politician, and you may not realize it, but that goal may be attributable to your value of justice and your desire to bring greater justice into the world. You can do that through the vehicle of becoming a politician. You may have a value of peace, which I named earlier, and you may uptake the practice of meditation because it infuses greater peace in your consciousness, in your being, and you are then more seamlessly able to disperse that value into the world. So naming and isolating our values and recognizing where we're coming from, these things that ultimately we can't prove, we can't rationalize, and that's okay. They're important to us because they're important to us. Naming and recognizing these things will give us these sort of holy grails or north stars to follow in our lives. And in moments where we don't know what else to do, we can ask ourselves, well, which path would bring about greater peace? Because that's what I value. Which path would bring about greater inspiration, greater artistry? Because that's what I value. Greater love, and so on and so forth. So that's how we can use values to navigate these moments of ambiguity that Kyle and I were discussing. What about intuitions? In some sense, I think this is the easiest thing to discuss and to follow. So I previously made a video about making decisions. It's called How to Make Decisions Really. And part of the reason I wanted to make this video is as a successor to that one, because I think this view that I'm presenting here is a little more complicated, allows for a little more nuance, and it also addresses, again, those moments where doubt is setting in, perhaps because a long time has elapsed since we vocalized a decision. We said, I'm going to move to a new place, this fall. And we said that at the beginning of the year. And, 6-7 months later, we start to wonder, well, is this the right decision? Maybe I should stay where I'm living now. So in that kind of moment of doubt, this framework of competing variables becomes a little richer, a little more sophisticated for the application. But in that previous video, I spoke almost solely about receiving and following intuitions and using how we feel after acting upon those intuitions as a gauge of the correctness of the decision. So if I make a decision and immediately after I'm flooded with repulsion and regret, that might not be the best decision for me. However, if I'm suffused with a sense of peace, that could be a good sign, right? And I'm not sure too much more needs to be said about intuition, but that it is the arrival of a sort of image or sensation that generally indicates either something mysterious and usually positive, or something potentially negative, a marker of danger. So we might have a bad feeling about a person, and we don't know why, but there's something funny about that person. There's something off. That's our intuition. We might have a very positive feeling about a person or about a place, and we feel, I have to meet or work with that person, or I have to go to that place. And again, we don't know why. It is the inculcation of a form of knowledge faster than the processing of our physical mind. It is knowledge that we are capable of grasping, but not yet capable of rationalizing or articulating. And we may never be. And just as with values, we can use our intuitions to guide us in these moments of ambiguity. We can say to ourselves, I really don't know why, but I feel called to travel to this new place. I heard the name in a dream, or it keeps coming up in my life through synchronicities or something like that. And I'm just going to go with that. So that can be one of these variables that at certain moments we hold up more highly than the others. The third of these variables that my friend Kyle listed in his spontaneous definition was relationships. And so I think this can be, it can be broken down in innumerable ways, because relationships are endlessly variable. And our, orientation to relationship is uniquely chosen. But one basic way it can manifest is, asking my friends for help in these moments of ambiguity, these moments of doubt, and asking them to reflect back to me who I am, which really appeals back to the first of these variables, which is value. Our friends, if they know us deeply at all, know or can infer our values, and they can remind us of those, which then makes us more durable in these moments. Okay, I know who I am, I know what I care about, and that is going to guide me. That is going to foster my next decision point, right? Sometimes, and I think this can be dangerous, but it can be important, our relationships may take precedence over our values or our intuitions, if we consciously choose to value them above those things. So I think this example will be familiar to many people, but for instance, I have a friend and he wants to leave the organization for which he works because He has political issues with how that organization is conducting itself. However, he also has 2 young daughters, and he has committed himself, there's that word, to see them through college. He needs his salary to feel financially competent to steer them through this, life program. And so he's consciously choosing to set aside his grievances with the organization until his daughters are finished with college. That is an instance of sacrificing one's values, sacrificing one's intuitions, perhaps, for the consciously chosen value attribute of taking care of one's relationships, placing those first. And we might say that in an instance like this, actually a deeper value is revealing itself, which is his feeling of responsibility or his duty to care for those around him. So that is another way we might appeal to relationships in these kinds of moments. And as I said earlier, there are infinite number of ways our relationships can reflect back to us what our values are, as I said. They can comment upon and help crystallize our intuitions. They can sometimes, through contrast, remind us of what not to do. So if we have a very strong intuition and someone dismisses it, they can remind us, oh, this person actually doesn't see me. And perhaps in the next phase of my life, this relationship will not endure, right? So that attribute cannot guide me in this moment, and I must trust these other things. Relationships can sort of take themselves out of the running in that way too. So as I said at the beginning, I find this definition profound because it meets us in moments of doubt where I think are really when we need help. We don't need help when the intuition is clear and instinctual and we knowingly trust it. We need help when doubt begins to creep in and we don't know what to trust or what to do. And in those moments, this definition gives us a multitude of options with which to play. I would also add that this definition allows us to grow consciously and multifariously throughout life. And that is part of what we're here to do. This definition is a much more Taoist definition as opposed to a Christian, perhaps, definition of commitment. A central tenet of Taoism is non-contrivance, meaning not holding to fixed principles, but rather meeting each situation uniquely and obeying the dictates of that situation. And this definition of commitment, while it holds forth a little more structure than that, it also allows us to wind our way around within that structure in a manner that gives us freedom and pliability. And again, I think that's part of what we're here to experience. So I hope some aspect of this definition and my articulation of its uses can be helpful to you if you find yourself in one of these moments of doubt or ambiguity. How can you more deeply mine and seek after your values in this kind of moment? How can you use your values to prefer goals and objectives? How can you use your intuitions to cast away any doubts you may have about your decision? Even if your intuition is perhaps in denial of your relationships or your values, can you allow that factor to supersede? And in moments where those two attributes, values and intuitions, are perhaps failing you or weaker, how can you fall back on your relationships? And how can a sturdiness of relationships sort of remind you more deeply of who you are? So, again, thank you for listening. I hope this was helpful, and may you have a blessed day. Bye-bye.